Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Today we're going to take a look at Tiny Epic Defenders. Now this is the first of the Tiny Epic games from Game One Games that I'm going to be reviewing, and these games have just been humongously successful on Kickstarter. First there was Tiny Epic Kingdoms, which I haven't actually played yet, which just came out of nowhere seemingly and made a tremendous amount of money, and so did Tiny Epic Defenders. That came next, and they just recently wrapped up Tiny Epic Galaxies on Kickstarter, which set a record, I think, for most number of backers for a board game, tabletop gaming project on Kickstarter. So it's really been amazing, and Game One Games' whole philosophy has been having a small game that has the feel of a bigger, more grandiose game, but doesn't take up as much space on your shelf, and is very cost-effective, cheap for people to actually pick up and purchase. Hence the tiny and epic part of their name. And what Tiny Epic Defenders is in particular, Kingdoms was a competitive game, and Galaxies is also competitive, but is more of a spacefaring 4X game. Defenders takes place in the same sort of fantasy world as Kingdoms, but it is purely cooperative. You and the other players take control of sort of fantasy archetypes, who like Paladin and Warrior and this Dark Elf Ranger and all these things, and you're trying to protect this kingdom from being raided by monsters and having the capital city destroyed. You don't want that to happen. Instead, you want to defeat the giant overlord who's controlling all these monsters. So let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played, and then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm just going to give you a very brief run through of Tiny Epic Defenders. This is a cooperative game, a fully cooperative game, no traitors here, although that would be kind of interesting, where you are trying to protect a kingdom. Specifically, you're trying to protect the capital city of this kingdom. And there are these monstrous hordes that are coming at the kingdom from all these different angles, all these outlying areas. They're trying to mow through these areas to get to the capital city, and you need to prevent that from happening. So that's how you keep yourself from losing, is protecting the capital city and making sure that the threat track on the top there does not get all the way to the end. But there's only one way to win. The way to win is to defeat the epic foe. The epic foe is this giant card over here, well, giant compared to most everything else in the game, that is going to show up at a certain point once you've gone through enough of the monstrous hordes. When that epic foe shows up, you need to defeat it, or him, or her, and then, once you do that, you have won the game, but that is easier said than done. So this takes place in your sort of stereotypical fantasy world. So the first thing you're going to do is have each player choose one of these characters, and there's many different characters to choose from in the base game. I just have assume a 4-player game out here. This game can be played from 1 to 4. So here we have the Paladin. This is the life point track, so she has 5. And these special abilities won't make a lot of sense, but for instance, her passive ability, there's either passive or action abilities. Actions require you to use your action points, but passive is just always on whenever it applies. Her ability lets her, whenever she defends, she can sacrifice an additional health points or restore a health point to someone else, or reduce the threat level in her region by 1. I know that doesn't make any sense right now, but hopefully it will later. Let's take a look at a couple of the other ones that are out here. We have the Bard. The Bard's special ability as an action, see that one says action instead, and she has less hit points. If an adjacent outer region has an action, she can use it just by paying the action point cost. She doesn't have to be there. A couple other ones, we have the Warrior. This is a lizard folk warrior. As an action, he can use a move action to go 2 regions instead of typically 1. And then the last one in our merry band of adventurers here is the Ranger. And her special ability is, as a passive ability, whenever she wants to do the succor and fight abilities, she can do it to a clockwise adjacent region instead of just the region that she's in. Again, I'll explain all of this and what that all means with more clarity in a moment. Now, the other little bit of setup you have is, well, there's quite a few things actually, but you also have to set up the actual region. So right there in the center of the, we'll call it board for simplicity's sake, is the capital city. And each of these meeples actually represents your character as well. The capital city is what you need to defend during the course of the game, and that city is going to be surrounded by outlying regions. So you have mountains, plains, desert, coast, ruins, and forest. And each of these is actually double-sided with a different special ability on each side. The capital city has the same ability. But each of them also, the ability, just like with the heroes, is either going to be active or passive, meaning you have to spend an action point or not. Now you might be asking, what is this little orange thing with the track on the top? Now, this is actually a little fire meeple, and this is the threat track. So for the capital city, I already explained that if that ever gets to the end, which is 6 spaces, then it's game over. The heroes have lost. However, for the other spaces, it's not necessarily game over. In fact, it's not game over, but it's really bad if the threat track ever gets up to the top. This happens for monsters attacking. And if that threat track ever goes all the way to the top for the outer regions, you take one of the cards especially designated as a destruction card. I'll get back to that in a second. That's more of the setup. And that region is destroyed. And now from now on, when monsters attack this region, instead of raising the threat level here, it's going to go straight to the capital. So that's bad. Don't let that happen if you can avoid it. And just to go through what some of the different areas do, the plains, this side that I happen to have out right now, I'm not going to go over every side, says that you can defend the 2 regions adjacent to it from there. Now, adjacency in this game, the capital city is adjacent to these 2 cards, which in this case is the desert and the forest. The outlying regions are just adjacent to each other or to the capital city. So the forest is adjacent to the capital city, the mountains and the ruins, the mountains is adjacent to the forest and the plains, and so on, sort of clockwise around the area. And more examples, the forest, the action here says for 2 action points, you can reduce the threat level of any other region by 1. The ruin says you can transfer 1 threat level from another outer region to this area for an action. The desert says the passive ability, it takes you 2 action points to move from the desert. That's a bad thing. Both of the desert sides are bad because it's the desert. There's really nothing fun to be had there. But now the other little bit of setup that you need to do involves these decks of cards. You're actually going to construct 3 different decks of cards. I already mentioned that big card there is for the Epic Foe, but on top of there is the Horde deck. Over there is the Destruction deck and my microphone. And the Destruction deck really is only just cards that you're not using in the other decks during the game, and they're going to be used as placeholders when you need to note, as I explained before, that an area is destroyed. But the Turn deck is where most of the interesting things are going to happen. So part of that deck is going to be enemies. Part of the deck is going to be the actual player cards that determine how the turns work. So that's an interesting thing in this game, is that you don't just like pick a person and they go and then you go clockwise. You have to wait for your card to come up. So in this deck, you have the player cards of the appropriate color. So this would mean that the blue player is going to go, then the green player, yellow player, and the red player. And if you're playing with 1 or 2 players, you actually have group ally cards as well. Now, when one of these cards comes up, whether it's a group ally card or one of the general ally cards, that player immediately gets 3 action points to spend. And it's possible that they can get a 4th point as well. I'll explain that in a minute. The group ally card simply says that the group as a whole, again, this is only if you're playing 1 to 2 players, otherwise he's going to the Destruction deck. The group as a whole gets 3 action points to spend amongst themselves, or 4 if one of the regions has been destroyed. I'll get back to what you can actually do on your turn with those in a moment, but the other cards that are here are what I would call the standard enemy cards. Each standard enemy card has 2 halves to it that are keyed in to one of the different regions on the map. So you have to look at the symbols on the regions to see which one. So this is the plains, and this is the desert. And another one would be, here is the mountains, and here is the ruins. The ruins, otherwise. And so when one of these cards is drawn, you immediately look at the appropriate region, and then you will raise the threat track. So this was actually the mountains and the ruins. So the mountains is up there. I would just raise this up by 1 if that happened. And then the mountains, which was down here, I would raise that up as well. But, of course, the heroes can try to prevent that. I'm going to get back to that in a second. So the whole game is really drawing these cards from the turn deck that you've constructed and taking either your player turns or the monster turns, quote-unquote, and so to speak. Whenever you burn through the entire deck of cards, you're going to stop, hammer time. Then you're going to take one of the cards from the Horde deck that's sitting on top of the Epic Foe deck, and you're going to mix it into the turn deck, reshuffle, and take your entire turn again. Now, in that Horde deck, you have a few different things. You have more of the enemy cards, first off, but they're going to be, because there's a lot of different types of enemy cards, they're definitely not going to be the same as the ones you had before. So this one is Forest and Ruins, and then you've got the Coast and Mountains, and so on. And so by mixing those in and it being random, you're not entirely sure what is going to be showing up later as you shuffle through and take round after round after round and have to face new threats. Also in here are dire enemies. Now, the number of dire enemies that are in here are going to be dependent on what the difficulty level of the game is. So if you're playing at the highest difficulty level, which is Epic, there'll be 4 of them. That's what I set this up for. And dire enemies, well, they function the same as normal enemies in that whatever area they're keyed into, they're immediately going to raise the threat level there, but they also have a nasty ability. And if you don't defend against their attack, then you're going to, and also prevents the threat level from going up, you're also subject to their nasty ability. So the Sea Serpent says, heroes in outer regions must move 1 outer region clockwise. This actually happens before defending, so that's kind of nasty. The Minotaur costs 3 health to defend against. I haven't really explained defending yet, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. And the Wraith, players choose 1 hero to immediately lose 2 health points if you don't defend against it. The good news about defending against the dire enemies is that you will get one of these artifacts. And artifacts have a lot of special cool abilities that you can use one time and then it's discarded, either as an action or as a free action. Free actions can be done at any time. So the Hammer of Might immediately reduces the threat level of the region you're in by 0. This is only for the person that's using it, and you can't really trade them. The Boots of Zephyr says a free action. For the rest of the round, you can move for 0 action points. The Horn of Command immediately moves any number of players anywhere you want as an action, and so on. So actually, before I go any further, so I'm just kind of skipping all over the place, let's explain what the heroes can actually do in the game. Now, I already explained that when a hero's turn comes up because their ally card is drawn from the deck, or when they have a group ally card in a 1 or 2 player game and they're allotted some action points, well, then they're going to be able to use them and take actions. So let's say that the blue player's card was drawn. I'll explain the different things that you can do. One thing that you can do is simply move. Going from one adjacent region to another is just 1 action point. And again, things like the Lizard Warriors abilities can affect that. You might get to move extra spaces, but normally it's just 1 for 1. And like I said, the desert has this nasty thing where you have to spend 2 just to move out of there. The next type of thing you can do is provide succor. And what this is that let's say that the threat region here where I ended up in the desert is high or higher than 0. I can spend an action point per threat level that I would like to lower it by. And remember, that's good because if it ever gets all the way to the end, then it's going to be destroyed. You don't want that to happen. And the other things you can do, you can use, I've already kind of explained, you can use the action, quote-unquote, ability of regions that require you to spend an action, and you can also use artifacts that require you to spend an action. The last type of action you can take is to, on your turn, is to fight the epic foe, which I haven't quite explained yet. Now, there's something else that heroes can do that's not on their turn and doesn't require action points, and that is actually defending a region. I mean, that's kind of the name of the game, so you have to defend at some point. What that means is that if one of the normal enemy cards or dire enemy cards comes out of the turn deck, so let's say, for example, the green player was over here in the forest, and out of the turn deck you get this nasty enemy card, which says that the threat level would go up in the forest, and the ruins, by the way. But in the forest right now, we have the green player, and the green player, who, by the way, is the Elf Ranger, or Dark Elf Ranger, says, I'm not going to let that happen. So instead of the threat level going up 1 like it normally would, the Ranger is going to choose to lose a health. That is what defending means. You're putting yourself in harm's way in order to fight back the monsters trying to get into the capital city. Now, going back just one step, when you're taking your actual action points, if you use all 3 of your action points, or if one ally uses all 3 of the action points from the group ally card, well, then you're allowed to spend 1 and only 1 health point in order to gain an additional action point for that turn that you can use to do whatever you want. Although I should point out that you can only use a region's ability once per ally card that has come out, or group ally card. So when the last of the Horde cards comes off of the Epic Foe and you go to put another Horde card into the deck after you've gone through it another time, but you can't do that, there's no more Horde cards left, then the Epic Foe is revealed, and I did this at random, and it is the Kraken. Alright, so here is the Kraken card. This is the big bad guy that we have to defeat. Once that's popped over, you're going to take this sort of neutral health marker, put it on the 10. I know those numbers are kind of hard to see. And now, this is also going to be keyed into a region, but this one is, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to switch these regions. So let's say that the coast was down here. This means that the Kraken is going to be keyed into the coast and is going to hang out here. And now, in order to defeat it, the heroes have to congregate at the coast and use their action points to fight. That is the last type of action that a hero can do. Every action point that you spend to fight is going to knock the Kraken's health down. But of course, the epic foes have special abilities as well. So for instance, the Kraken's is that a hero has to spend 2 action points in order to enter the region instead of the normal 1, although character special abilities can supersede that. Also, the ability of the region is no longer active. There are some special artifacts and things that can move an epic foe around, but normally not. And just to show you a couple of the other ones that come in the game, there's your stereotypical dragon, because why not? They all have 10 health, but their special abilities will be different. So for instance, the Red Dragon's Scorch ability says that at the end of every round, deal 2 damage to all heroes, no matter where they are. The Colossus, another word for giant worm apparently, has the Clash ability that says that when damaged, the attacking hero loses a health. So they have really nasty abilities, but you have to take care of them. You have to defeat them in order to win the game, and you have to do it before your capital city is destroyed. That is just a quick and dirty run-through of tiny epic defenders. Now let's get to my final thoughts.
All right, I always start off talking about artwork, components, and theme. I think the artwork and components on Tiny Epic Defenders are solid. Yes, this isn't a huge, grandiose game. It's not really supposed to be, but I think what's there is really great. The artwork is something that I warmed to. I didn't actually like it when I saw it on the Kickstarter for both Tiny Epic Kingdoms and Tiny Epic Defenders. I think it uses the same art style, but it's grown on me. I think it looks really good in Defenders, and I like the full color artwork on the back of the cards. I think even the location artwork looks pretty good. I think that on the Epic Foes, it looks a little bit cheesier, maybe because it's on a bigger scale on the card, but still, I think everything looks solid. I love the little... well, I don't love the meeples, but I'm not a big fan of meeples. I know that some people are. It's like a cult thing. Love meeples, more meeples. I'm not a fan, but I get that they're not gonna put high detail quality plastic miniatures into the box for each of the different characters, so that's fine. I do love the little hearts, though. The little wooden hearts are neat. I'd actually like those for a bunch of other games where you have to keep track of damage or special abilities and things. And I like the fire for the threat. I can't really explain it, but I had another game that I had reviewed, Regnum Angelica, which completely different game, but it had little meeple fire and water and things. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I don't know. I just dig that. So I think artwork components are solid. The theme. Now, this was a point of contention for some other people that had reviewed the game. And I know where you're coming from, and I'll talk about this in a bit, because the game it can feel very detached from the theme because it's pretty puzzly and it's an efficiency game. So I get that, but I actually thought the theme came out more than I would have suspected before I played the game. Because you're going around defending this capital city and there's monsters pouring out from every side. It's tough to conceptualize that at first because there's not like a horde of plastic miniatures that are coming to the location and flooding into the city. Instead, it's just you're flipping over a card and hoping that you can defend against it, or going there and giving succor and fighting them back at a later point. That can be hard to visualize at first, but I think it worked out eventually as you start playing the game, and especially when a region is destroyed. Like the very first game of this that I played, and I guess I'll mention that I played this twice with people and 3 times without people. I played this solo, in other words. So the very first game I actually played with other people, and I was like, well, I don't really, what's the whole thing with the destruction? I guess they're just getting straight through to the capital. I guess that makes sense. And someone else pointed out, well, yeah, it does make total sense, because they've the monsters have completely taken over that area, whatever it is, the desert, the forest, the plains, whatever it might be. And so that's why the ability no longer matters, because you're not there anymore. So you may be on the card, but your meeples are actually at like the pass leading into the capital city, and they're just there hunkered down, beating back the enemy forces. And it's no longer about trying to save that region, it's just about keeping them out of the city. So I think it really works in that regard. And when you add in the fact that all the characters are different and distinct and have their own special abilities that they add to the group, and they, for the most part, make some thematic sense, I think the theme is okay. I don't think it's great. I mean, I didn't really see or feel a storyline to the game, which was kind of a bummer, but it feels kind of generic. But still, there's a lot of games that share a fantasy theme like this that I could accuse of being generic, and I don't think Tiny Epic Defenders should be slammed for having a slightly better theme than actually some of those do. So I think it's okay. going to the gameplay, there's really interesting things at work here, despite being on such a small scale. And like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of puzzly. It's a game of efficiency. You're working together, and it's cooperative, and I dig cooperative games, so maybe I'm pre-inclined to like this sort of game. But you're trying to run around and use your actions in the best way possible to keep things from popping, to keep the regions from being destroyed and getting through to the capital city, and having to know when to go all out and when to sacrifice some areas, and when to say, okay, you know what, I could defend this, I'm here, the forest is being attacked, I could defend, I'm not going to. I'm not going to do that. It's the worst thing for me to do right now. It would be much better for me to get to my turn, maybe give it some sucre, and then go and use this region's special ability, or to do something else, or to use my ability to move you over here, and then you take care of it. That's the whole game, is figuring out the best pattern and the best way to move everyone around and get things done. And having everyone have their own unique special abilities adds a lot of variability to the game, together with the location abilities. Now, the one thing on Nitpick is that the book says, okay, only randomize the locations if you're playing on higher difficulty levels. I say randomize them all the time, because I don't really feel the need to sit there and say, like, okay, I think we should use this location, use this location, and this side of this location. What do you think? No, I think that you should just randomize them and put them out, because it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters, but it helps you to do that. It helps increase the replayability of the game, I think, because you're always going to have a different setup. And I think that with that, and with the player character powers, and with the different epic foes, you can play this game a number of times before it starts to feel samey. Especially for the cost of the game, I think that works out really, really well. So you're doing this game officially, this sort of puzzle, and how you're best going to do this. And what's interesting is that there is luck in the game. It's the luck of the draw, the cards coming out, right? But you know what's in that deck. You may not know before the game begins, but you go through the deck once, and now you know. It's pretty easy to keep track of. You know, okay, the desert's going to be hit twice, the ruins are going to be hit once, the coast is going to be hit twice, and maybe the forest is going to be hit. But the mountains and plains are fine, so we don't really need to worry about that in the next turn. But then you have a card coming in from the Horde deck, and who knows what that is. Could be a dire enemy, and when you go to higher difficulty levels, there might be more of them, or it could just be another normal enemy card, which might just be doubling up on the same stuff that you already got to worry about. But it might be something completely different, and that's where the randomness comes in. But even with that randomness, you have some control. It's just a matter of remembering what's in there. You can't look through the discard pile, and I think that's a good thing. I think it would be too easy if you could. And hoping that your cards come out at the opportune time. And this is where it gets back to the capital city, because you don't die in this game, and some people might see that as kind of a cop-out, like, oh, you go down to 0, and then you just run back to the city. But it's figuring out when you need to go back to the city, and figuring out, or hoping, I should say, just guesstimating when you might be able to actually heal. And that's one of the instances that makes the group ally cards interesting as well. And I think we did this right, because I looked at a frequently asked questions forum on BGG about it. The fact that or actually, I only did this when we were solo. You don't do this with with 3 or 4 players, but where you get the group ally card, and you can distribute the action points among the heroes that you have. And when you do that, you can actually, assuming that they're starting off in the city, and the heroes that you have are distributed at least 1 action point, then they are allowed to heal in the city. So figuring out when to strategically move yourself back to the city, heal back up, run back out, and try to fight the threats, but knowing that if you move back out, unless you're already at 0, you might be having to sacrifice a region. You might be having to do that depending on what stage you're in the game, but if you don't run back and heal now, how much worse are things going to be? So that back and forth of figuring out what you need to take care of now, what you can let go, that's really interesting. And see, this is interesting because all of these things I'm describing sound like a much bigger, more grandiose game, but it's not. It's a very simple game, very easy to understand, very quick to go through. The box says 30 minutes, and I think that's fairly accurate, really, even for your first game, give or take. And that's a really cool thing about the game, that I can be talking about it in such, well, I'll say it, epic terms, but it's still a very small game. I think that there's other things I could talk about. The epic foes are interesting with more special abilities, and the dire foes and how you can, or the dire enemies and how you can get artifacts. That's all really neat, and deciding when you can take their nasty ability, and sometimes just being forced to, or sometimes going all out against a dire enemy and deciding to defend against it just so that you can get an artifact. That's all really interesting. But if I was going to say that there are faults with the game, there's a few. No game is perfect, and I don't think Tiny Epic Defenders is an exception to that. One of them is that, well, first off, you need to set your expectations right. I referred to it as epic. It's really, but people have a or not a misconception, but they have a preconceived notion of what that is. This is not a big game full of miniatures, and you may not even get that feeling from it all the time. It's really just a puzzly efficiency game that happens to be cooperative. But, and so I think that's the problem that some people have with it, is that they go into it expecting something more than what it is. But if you go into it with the right mindset, I think which is what I had, where I sort of downplayed my expectations of what it was, you'll actually find more out of it, if that makes any sense. In other words, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the game. I don't know if that's really a knock against it, but I just think that people need to be aware of that. Some legitimate issues that I think I had with it. One is that, well, the epic foes. Not that epic. Everything else leading up to that actually felt more epic than the epic foes did. In each game that I've played with the epic foes, especially after our first one, when we had a taste of what they were like, I think our first foe was the Kraken, which was arguably one of the most annoying ones, but once we kind of realized that the pattern is, and I realized this in my solo games, was that just make sure everything's kind of okay, knowing that the epic foe is about to come out, and then when it comes out, swarm! Go to it, beat the crap out of it, let every other region die, it doesn't matter, as long as your capital city's okay. Just sit there and pound on it until it dies. And that can feel a little anticlimactic. It's not a guaranteed victory, and I've lost this game once on like hard difficulty just before switching over to epic, because I just figured, what the heck, I'll just go all out. It's just that it's weird. Ironically, it just doesn't feel that epic. Although I do like that they all have their own special abilities, but maybe I would have preferred if some of them had, something different about them, another type of special ability, or just something that made them, that really changed the game more dramatically, I guess. But then again, if you start doing things like that, you're making the game possibly more complicated than it should be. But that's a small beef that I had with it. I do think as well that this game in particular, and it has an alpha gamer problem. And I think that that's a term that gets bandied about way too much. I don't think that every cooperative game has an alpha gamer problem, despite what some people who don't like cooperative games might think. But the games that kind of have that issue under control tend to be more bigger, grandiose, more complicated games. For instance, Robinson Crusoe, which is above my head back here somewhere, in that game, theoretically, someone could just start barking out orders and telling people what to do and taking control of the game. But there's so much going on in that game. You're always at death's door. That usually what ends up happening is someone's turn comes around, they're like, okay, here's what I think you should do. I think that you should go here, and you should go exploring, and then you should put another worker here and try to get this tech. I guess? Maybe? I kind of have to worry about this because I just got bitten by a snake, so I might be dying soon, and then we all lose, so you kind of just do your thing. I'm just offering suggestions. That's kind of what happens in Robinson Crusoe, because everyone's got too much on their plate to worry about. Whereas I think in Tiny Epic Kingdoms, because it's so simple and streamlined, which are strengths of the game, it also makes it very easy for one player to just look at the board, because everyone can very simply see what's going on and say, okay, you go here, you do this, you use this ability, don't defend there, because if you defend there, it's just inefficient. You might as well just wait and have the paladin come over there and help you, because why not? And it's just an example, but it's just very easy for someone to take command of the game. And for that reason, I think that from here on out, almost all of my plays of this game are going to be either one player or two player, where that detriment to the game is tamped down quite a bit. I also think that with the group ally cards, the game is much more interesting, which is another reason I want to play it solo or two player, because that's the only instances where you get to use those cards. But I think that with less players, Alpha Gamer is much more under control in this game, and it's probably my biggest fault about it. I know that the games that I played with other people, it was a 2-4 player games, it was just like one person being very polite and respectful about it, just saying, yeah, this is clearly what we need to do. What, you want to do something different? I mean, we're going to die if you do that. I mean, it's very effortless how someone can just take control of the games, and that's a bit odd. But I think, again, that's just sort of a byproduct of the game being so easy to understand, easy to figure out, and simple to play, which are good things about it. It just lends to that kind of behavior. But even despite that, overall, and I could go on about some other things, but overall, I was really surprised by the game. I like it. It's going to sit in my collection, and part of that is because of how small it is, and I think that's part of the reason why they did that. And just the fact that I can play it very easily. I can bust it out when I just need something to do to play solo. It might even squeak into a top 10 solo games list because of just how neat some of the mechanisms are and the whole efficiency thing and how the decks work. I really enjoy that aspect of it. And it just looks good. And even with 2 players, I think that the game would be really good. With 3 or 4 players, maybe not as much. And I think that that's going to be the number one question you should ask yourself too if you're on the fence about this game. Who are you most likely to play this game with? What's the makeup of your gaming group going to be like? Do they like cooperative games? Are you okay with the alpha gamer thing, or are you looking for something solo? The answer to that question is really going to be a huge determining factor on whether you should pick it up or not. But I think that the theme is surprisingly good. It looks good, and it plays pretty coolly. That's not much of a word, but Tiny Epic Defenders. I was surprised. I like it.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.